Hello there, my fellow peppers. Welcome to another episode of Art Critiques from Reddit. Today, we're going to cover facial anatomy, color picking, and shading. I'm your host, Unkempt Snugglepepper. So I'm going to start with anatomy. And the artist mentioned this is a man, but they have a very feminine appearance, and that was intentional. And we're going to respect that. And I think the eye shape was intentional and the stylistic choices were intentional. However, for a stylized piece to be believable, the features still have to retain their functionality. What does that mean? So we have the eye, and if this is a sphere within a socket, then that's where the sphere of the eye would be, and the eyebrow would need to be higher in order to accommodate the sphere sitting within the socket. So with our eye, if we wanted to keep it this size, I'm guessing they're kind of looking out with their eyes half closed. So that's going to move across the sphere, and this is going to move across the sphere. It's important to note that there is this section right here, which is going to be the inner corner of the eye, and there's also going to be a smaller inner section over here, which is the outer corner of the eye. And then bringing the eyelashes more around the sphere. Moving on, this will be affected on how you want to tackle the eyes, if you want to make them smaller or raise the brow. But generally, there is a line that goes around the sphere of the head, and the bottom of the nose correlates to the bottom of the ear, and then the eyebrows correlate to the top of the ear, which should be about there. So a few issues are happening with the ear. First, it's not aligning with the facial features that it needs to align with. And then in addition to that, where you had the jaw going up wouldn't have connected with your ear. So we'll bring that up. Generally, when someone has really thick curly hair, you won't see the ear unless you have a significant amount sitting behind the ear, which is going to change how you draw the hair. Now, moving on to the nose and mouth. When we have a face, we have a line that goes down the center that is showing us where the middle of the face is. And the nose should hit that line. In addition, the center of the lips will hit that line as well. So this is where the center should be. So I want to bring the lips in this way a bit. So I would go there, and then with the nose, I would move it here because we're in 3/4 view, and then that puts the lips there. Another issue I think we're running into is that this line in the neck is too long. So his shoulder would be about there. That's where his Adam's apple would be. And then in here is where you get the clavicle, the collarbone. And there's a dip at the base of the neck. And then tendons that run like so. And then about there is going to be where we see the division between the pectoral muscles on the chest. Since he is more feminine, there are a few things you can consider in, do you want him to be almost completely feminine, or do you want him to be a little androgynous? So the jawline, you can square a little bit more to bring out the masculinity. Of course, longer eyelashes are associated with femininity, and thinner eyebrows, which you have. But you may also consider, do you want a visible Adam's apple? Generally, men, even when they have female characteristics, their characteristics overall are male, unless they have facial surgeries. Just those are just things to consider. In my opinion, I would probably give him a more square jaw, have his Adam's apple there, and go with a stronger nose bridge, just to give the viewer kind of that androgynous look. But that's just my opinion. So let's move on to shading. And one of the things we're going to do is look at what makes a good flesh tone. This flesh tone is a little too pink. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to make it a bit more saturated and move it up towards yellow. And then I'm going to move it up again, a little towards yellow, becoming less saturated. I'm going to go back to this tone, make it more saturated, because that mid-tone is where you're going to see a lot of a person's undertone and a lot of that saturation. And then to make it darker, I'm going to get more saturated, move it darker, and then start moving towards purple. And bring it down again, a bit more towards purple. Okay, so one of the darkest places in the eye is going to be the eye socket. And our face is made in a way that this eye socket recedes further back into the skull so that the eye is protected. There's bone all around it, and the brow comes out just a bit. I'm going to make that eyebrow a little bit higher so that that socket will function. And then the eyelid, if his eyes are partially open and partially closed, will come around like that. I'll start to get a bit of the highlight. That brow bone will get a bit of highlight. Remembering that the eyelids are wrapping around a spherical shape. And then the forehead is going to have some light to it. And then where his hair comes down, we're going to have a bit of a shadow. The next place that's going to receive a dark shadow is under the nose. And it has a form shadow as well as a cast shadow. And the very darkest point on the face is going to be those nostrils and the corner of the lips and inside the eye socket. And then we'll put a little bit of shadow where the cheek meets the jawline. And then this is away from the light, so this will all be in shadow. So the eye socket also comes down and we have the lower lid. Making sure we're not getting too yellow. And then the nose gets a highlight, the cheek gets a highlight. And I am warming him up a bit, and I am bringing in brighter colors. So if he's supposed to be kind of a paler tone, like a vampire kind of thing, the highlights and shadows would still apply. You would just use less saturation. And then in the cheek, generally tends to have a bit more saturation. And we're going to give it a little bit of a blend. I like to start with a hard brush and kind of block everything in, and then go in with the soft brush and create that gentle softness. And then as the face goes closer to that chin line, there's a bit of a form shadow over the overall face. It happens in women that as we get into this area where the jawline is, the skin loses some saturation. And that means for men, they get the 5 o'clock shadow. Generally, women are a little less saturated here, but it doesn't get quite as blue. Okay. Skin is difficult because there's so much complexity to it. Not only are you changing in value, but also hue. And unlike other things, like if you were to shade a sphere, changing the hue and changing the value would be enough to render a realistic sphere. But with skin, there's so much variation in the skin based on, is it stretching over an area where the blood vessels are very close to the skin, which is going to make it more saturated, or is it at a different part of the body? With the lips, the top lip is darker, unless you're lit from below, because it's facing away from the light. And a little bit of highlight on the chin. We'll smooth that out. So now he's beginning to look more lively. A note on eyelashes. Generally, from this distance, I wouldn't worry too much about eyelashes as individual entities. Rather, think of the lash line kind of as a whole. Then for the hair, curly hair is tricky because there are so many smaller parts compared to straight hair. So what I would do is pick this color, go lighter, again moving towards yellow, and kind of follow where you want the strands to be. I can see you've done work in here, but there's not quite enough contrast. Right? Certain parts of these curls are going to catch the light. And I think the secret to making it appear realistic is to pick where a few locks are and create variation between where you are placing your locks. And then also keeping in mind where the light source is. With curly hair, there are strands that kind of sit above other strands, and that's what we're trying to capture. So by building those strands and where the hair moves together, we can create a bit more of a semi-realistic appearance. Because someone who has straight hair will just, there's a band of light that moves around it. And it's generally all going in one direction. So I would continue that process, uh, especially if you're going to be looking at references in order to better capture the hair. So those are the changes that I would recommend. Of course, I could spend more time rendering the features and trying to get a smoother application of brushstrokes. So to recap, in anatomy, be sure that when you are creating a feature, that it still maintains its function. The nose has to have nostrils, the eyes exist in a socket, the lips don't have a line around them unless you line your lips, that sort of thing. And then with shading, I would use more contrast. As the colors get darker, they're going to take on a more purple tone, and then as they become lighter, they're going to take on a more yellow tone. and various parts of the face are going to have different saturation depending on where it is. Overall, I would recommend increasing the contrast within your piece. I think you may be a little shy to putting down bolder colors. I think that'll really bump up your paintings. So this is what I have done, and then this is the original. Oh, there's the original. So there's the original. There are our edits. If you found this video helpful, please consider giving a like or a comment. It really helps me out, and have a good one.